There's consciousness fields all around us. In Japan, if you go to buy a house or an apartment, they have to disclose if there was a suicide. It's in law because people know that there's an effect. We walk into a place, there's a history there, there's a field there, and it does affect us.
So Lourdes in France, the water is known for having certain type of healing properties in it, right? If you go to some of the temples in India, they have temples for prosperity. In Japan, they have temples for helping you conceive a child or having a good harvest and a crop. So that's a different type of consciousness field. It would have a different intention, and they would develop and program these temples to increase that person's level of consciousness in a particular area.
Jeffrey, Clayten, welcome to the podcast. This is my first podcast in a long time where I've had two people at the same time in all different parts of the world. So please forgive me if it goes astray slightly. So we try and avoid crossover talk and everything else. But I'm very excited. And interestingly enough as well, what I was pondering on was that we used obviously your technology at our event in New Zealand the weekend. And then people saw the postcard and I was explained it to them, and I saw this glazed look go over their face initially, and I thought, wow, I need to brush up on how I understand this technology myself as well, because it was certainly evident within the space in the room while I was there. So I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey. You caught my eye, but if like a complete stranger stops you in the street or you're at an intimate dinner party and they ask you what you do for a living, how do you go from there, mate?
Usually I start off by talking about consciousness fields because it's like an understanding that's obvious, but most people don't think about it. And without that, what we do doesn't make sense. So, there's consciousness fields all around us. When we go to a graveyard or an old battlefield, we can feel heavy, kind of low energy, maybe some negative thoughts. That's a low consciousness field, and it's just there. You can kind of feel when you walk into that area when it starts, and you can back up, and it dissipates. So it's an area of influence that's consciousness at different levels, and as we walk around the world, they're all around us. You go to a pilgrimage place, an elevated place where people have come together to meditate or pray together, it can feel uplifting and high energy and positive thoughts. And that's a high consciousness field. And so what Clayten and I discovered is you could call it a technology. It's a system that creates a high consciousness field anywhere in the world. And in that high consciousness field, it supports transformation, it supports evolution, through really being a sanctuary. It's quieter in some ways. The EMFs are quieter. Thought forms, other consciousness fields that might be around are supported to be like higher consciousness. So that it's a environment for our evolution, to support us to evolve. And it helps us to I don't know if counter is the right word, but to be supported in a sanctuary in a noisy world.
Right. What about you, Clayten? Is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, as Jeff said, it's like the elusive, obvious conversation, consciousness fields. If you go on the positive side, just think about being at a wedding, when people are making a commitment to each other. Everybody's come together with an open heart and in a space of love. And that ceremony has been foundational to the survival and the success of our civilizations. If people don't get married and have children, there is no civilization, there is no humanity. So a wedding is a very powerful example of a positive consciousness field. It's just Once you start talking to people about it that way, typically they're like, oh, that's kind of really obvious. You go to think of your grandmother's house on Thanksgiving, if you grew up in a extended nuclear family, and if they were on the farm, you go out to the country and you have Thanksgiving, and, you spend the whole day there. And if it's a classic Norman Rockwell family gathering, then it's usually something everybody looks forward to, and it's a beautiful day.
Yeah. And that consciousness field, are we affecting that? Like, let's start to break it down. I'm thinking of our listeners as well. Our state of being, where we spend a lot of time, like I spend a lot of time in this office, right? Or a lot of time, in the house. And am I affecting that by my own state of being internally from my field that I'm emitting? Or is the field affecting me that is emanating from the larger field, or both?
I think it's both. It's blending, but we as humans are very powerful, and we affect the world around us all the time. And if you think about it, we know about auras and that there's a field around us. So we carry this consciousness field with us, and sort of the more intense it is, the more effect that it has on the space around it. So you could be, intensely happy, intensely ecstatic. That really affects the space, and you have crystals all around you, in the drywall, the crystalline structure in drywall, in the flooring, in the concrete block. So all of that holds this energy. And so if you're, very ecstatic in a moment, that is present in that crystalline structure, and it's there, it remains there in that place. The same happens if there's something very negative and it's very intense. It can also have a stain, it hangs around in that crystalline structure. So we as humans bring our field with us, and what we're experiencing, whether we're in meditation or we're in a fight or we're in a loving embrace, all of that comes to the space. So you have what we bring, and then there's what's already there from the history. So that most of the houses we live in, somebody else has lived in. The land has had other people living on it, maybe not in that house before the house was built. There could be thousands of years of history in a place. So we walk into a place, there's a history there, there's a field there, and it does affect us. Like very low consciousness fields, we tend to have negative thoughts, and we tend to feel less energy and less elevated. And that's why in Japan, if you go to buy a house or an apartment, they have to disclose if there was a suicide or someone died by violence there. It's in law, because people know that there's an effect if you move into that place. And in Japan also, if you are very successful, like financially, and you do really well, and then you leave the house, you move out and you sell the house, people want to have that house because they want to be, they want that financial success energy. So these fields or these consciousness areas stick around. So we have us, the space, and then what develops between two people. So there's a conscious kind of two or more gathered. There's like an additional ramp up of energy and evolutionary action together when more than two people gather, or two or more gather.
Almost like a sympathetic resonance. That's how I kind of look at it. That one's resonating out externally from us, and we naturally, like when we go into nature, we naturally start to tune into the resonance of nature if we stop and drop in and slow down enough to be with it, isn't it? Everything that's very noticeable. What intrigues me as well, because obviously you're preaching to the converted here, because I run retreats and events and feel into the shifts of those fields, and the collective, as we change as an individual, the collective field emerges from that as well, and it just lifts everyone. And it's like an entrainment. That's how I see it. It's like it's teaching the body, which I find fascinating. But I was completely unconscious to this for a large part of my life as well, and would have thought this is just batshit crazy, to be honest with you, until I started having my own experiences and awakening to something that was beyond my five senses. What have you discovered? Because obviously you use technology to do this. And what have you discovered about, there's probably several questions in here, science and where it's meeting this at the moment, you know, for the skeptics out there, but also how then is that measured, that kind of level of consciousness? Because there's certainly been, on my own evolution, I've felt a depth of an awareness come online that I was completely unaware of, and I just didn't even know that that existed before.
Well, the way that we measure it is we primarily use the Hawkins Map of Consciousness.
Okay.
It's created by Dr. David Hawkins. And I'll explain that, but I just wanted to mention something about workshops. I worked with a gentleman who worked for context training for decades. And he always said that the work starts as soon as you commit to the workshop. Yeah. So the consciousness field starts before you even arrive, if you want to say that. And then if you measured it, like if you, say, did a workshop and you said, okay, if you emailed us the times, we can measure on the Hawkins Map of Consciousness the level of consciousness in the room at the time, during different times. Now that's the amount of energy, and then there's a specific field of consciousness related to the work you're doing, right? And that's why when you go to like Lourdes in France, the water is known for having certain type of healing properties in it, right? It's a very physical type of healing. And if you go to some of the temples in India, they have temples for prosperity, as Jeff said, like in Japan, or they have temples for helping you conceive a child or having a good harvest on a crop. So that's a different type of consciousness field, right? It might be the same level on the Hawkins map, but it would have a different intention. And they would develop and program these temples to increase that person's level of consciousness in a particular area. So it's a very sophisticated field of study. Now, what we use primarily, Guy, is we use the Hawkins Map of Consciousness created by Dr. David Hawkins. It's a logarithmic scale. It's done through muscle testing. And it's from 1 to infinity. 1 to 1,000 is the human realm, and it goes all the way up to infinity, which is God or divinity. And it's 200 is integrous, is courage or integrity. Like we'll start at the bottom. 20 is shame, 50 is despair, 100 is fear, 150 is anger, 200 is courage, 300 is willingness, 400 is reason, 500 is love, 550 is unconditional love, 600 is peace, 700 is where enlightenment begins, right? And then up 700 to 1,000 are the realms of enlightenment, which are pretty rare. And so when we measure things, we measure it on that scale. And FLFE as a default, right? If you go on to do the free trial, its default setting is at 550. Now your home could go much higher, but that's where it starts.
Okay. So just with a question to get clarity on that for everyone then. So what you're saying is that we hold a particular resonance or level of consciousness within us, and we're measuring our own energy field. So it's beyond the mind, it's beyond what we think we self, but it's the resonance that we're holding. It's
the reality. It's the reality of who we are, which includes and transcends our own perception of who we are.
Okay. And those testings, I mean, that's been around a long time, isn't it? Like, how accurate is it? Like, what have you found? Because muscle testing, there's people that can be skeptical out there around it, but also it could be a very fascinating way of finding out what's going on beneath the conscious mind.
Well, it can be very accurate. We have a team of about 7 people in the company, and we test each other's testing, right? So we have levels of verification of a calibration, if you will. Mm-hmm. And as a team, we've done over 14 million calibrations in the company.
14 million?
14 million. So we're looking for plus or minus about 5 points on a person or a place. We're really good with people and places. And there's other areas where we're not so good. We just haven't developed the expertise there and got the consistency yet, because it's a discipline. It's a profession.
Yeah.
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 We can't use it to find our lost keys too well.
No, not yet.
Yeah, working on it.
So
Yes. So just being part of that calibration team. So the way it works is a group come together, and everything is written out, so it's very consistent every time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, they're checking the level of consciousness of the properties, all the new properties that came on, to make sure when they went on the service that they are at that unconditional love level. So they're testing individually, and they're then checking quietly, and then they're checking to see if they all got the same answer. And if they didn't, then they move off and discover why. And generally, they're kind of testing a true or untrue of a statement in kinesiology. So it's not a yes or no, but you can use that to go on a scale. On the Dr. David Hawkins Map of Consciousness, level of consciousness property over the previous 7 days, calibrates at, you've got the strength of the muscle when the statement is true. So you say 500 or more, it's strong. 600 or more, it's weak. 550 or more, it's strong. 555 or more, it's weak. So it's 550. So you've got a group of people doing this, and then others check to make sure that what they did was correct. So they're testing.
yeah, no, fascinating. Thank you for clarifying. And then the state of being on that level of consciousness is then affecting how we perceive the world. Because if it's beyond perception, is that what's happening? And then what have you noticed as well by shifting the field environment, if it's then sympathetic resonance that is affecting us at some quantum level as well?
Yeah, and we can talk about the science and what we've discovered about that. So yeah, I mean, you're kind of looking at the nuts and bolts of how does that field affect us. I mean, we're in an environment, so this is on a home subscription or free trial. It's the entire property to the borders of the property. So just being in that field, it's like being at a wedding that's at love. You're kind of in that, and yes, there's some kind of resonance that's occurring. You're starting to feel love. And when you're immersed in that love, especially unconditional love environment, those parts of us, all of us is in it. And those parts of us that may have been disassociated or during trauma, they start to be in unconditional love when maybe they never experienced that before, that part of us. So that, people start to evolve relatively quickly. We see in the first 90 days, a pretty big jump in consciousness. But we've done research from the very beginning 13 years ago, and we started with some plant studies, and we now have 4 plant studies that, really look at the effect of a high consciousness field, the FLFE consciousness field, versus a control. And we see big differences in the plant growth, both the harvest of red wheat in a big farm in Saskatchewan, and that was over 22% in a increase in yield in those parts of the field that had the service on it. And the farmer didn't know it was done through John Deere's cloud. They were basically, the tractor was uploading the yield acre by acre, and then we looked at the data later and saw that. And so those experiments are all on the site, and the plant ones. And then we have a whole series of EMF mitigation experiments, because what we saw is EMF sources like smart meters, cell towers, especially very strong sources, they were lowering the level of consciousness of the space. So, our expertise is measuring consciousness. So, we saw that the place was degraded in its life force. It was lowering in its life force and its consciousness level, because life force energy sort of goes up with the level of consciousness. So it just became less healthy to be in. So we knew we had to do something. So we did create something in the service we could talk about later to help with EMFs. And then we did a series of studies that showed that the symptoms of EMF sensitivity went down in the FLFE environment.
That's interesting. Yeah. And look how much EMF is around now. I mean, we're swimming in it.
It's a soup.
Yeah. So what happened is we have a PhD on staff, Dr. Paula Bellwood, and then Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's a giant in the world of science, particularly in frontier science to mainstream science. That kind of journey of taking phenomenon that are occurring and studying them to see what's happening. Is it real? With frontier science, you really want to determine if there's really an effect. Is something really happening or not? Later in the history of the experiments, you will get to how it's happening, or what exactly is happening. But Dr. Gary Schwartz was Harvard, Yale, University of Arizona, head of multiple departments, and a professor of surgery psychology, all over the map. More than 500 peer-reviewed published studies, a dozen or more books. So very well known. He found out about us from a customer and was curious. And for a year, he worked with us on our experiments to bring them up to the next level. And he became so excited by the data. He's the total data geek. I mean, we give Gary, he's 80-something years old now, but you give him data and he'll stay up all night and maybe the next night until he's done with it. And so the analysis of the data has, really up-leveled, and it's really important because the statistical significance of any kind of data really tells you whether it's a little effect or a big effect. And there's always a probability that something will happen by chance or accidentally, right? So they have this statistical p-value that looks at that, like, okay, how much more, rare is it than just having it by chance? Is it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, rarer than just chance, like a 50-50 toss of the dice? And our data he got so excited about because we're in the hundreds of thousands to millions times significance beyond chance. So when a scientist like that sees that kind of statistical data and what he perceives as the positive effect that has showed up in our different studies, not just EMF and plants, but also customer experience survey, where we looked at what are the common experiences people have when they're on the service, and some other experiments that we've done with outside groups like IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah. That's fascinating. What about in terms of as it affects us, do people need to be open to it initially to go, willing to say, oh, I'll try this and let it open? Or can it be doing unconsciously? And then is it affecting the effects on the body? Do people naturally, what have you noticed? Like, do people naturally start making more healthier choices for themselves? And maybe because the level of consciousness is shifting, that they actually start to do things more support and love themselves naturally. You know, I'm just fascinated on all that, because I've worked in the health and fitness industry for a long time, you know, and I've always found them all kind of go hand in hand now anyway.
Well, what oftentimes happens, Guy, is a wife will do the free trial and then buy the service and have it on the house and not test the rest, not tell the rest of the family. So she's doing her own kind of blind experiment, right?
Right.
And yeah, that's very common. And we get, so when we did our customer survey, there was multiple benefits that people put at the top of their list. One was the ability to forgive self and others, the ability to change a negative thought to a positive thought, increased sleep, reduced anxiety, better relationships. Those are all the things at the top of our customer service survey. And Dr. Schwartz helped us create that survey so that, because the way you ask the questions is very important. So there is not only our double blind experiments, which we've done, and we actually did a triple blind experiment with EMF, like we've done double blind studies. And plant studies, of course, eliminate placebo because the plants don't know the service is on.
Of course.
So those are the main benefits that people report in the customer service survey.
I'm actually here right now at a retreat space in Taupo, New Zealand, and it's beautiful. And it really brings home the difference between understanding this work and actually living it. Because that's what retreats can do and why we're so passionate about it. They give you the space to slow down, to reconnect, and truly let something deeper land. So it's not just an idea, but it's a lived experience. That's why we created Live in Flow. So if you've been feeling this shift in your own life and you know you're ready to go deeper, then come back to liveinflow.co to find out more. Anyway, back to the episode. Do people get symptoms from it, like a detoxing almost? I mean, that's what we see at our events once we start elevating that level of energy.
Yeah, well, probably at your event, let's say the room starts at 500, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you put FLFE on, it goes up and up. I was testing the level of consciousness of your webinar, of your seminars at one point, right? So what probably happens is you start at 500, you go to 6, you might have 650 in the room, and every point up is 10 times more energy, right? And each level of consciousness has a certain number of microwatts of electricity with it. So the level of consciousness might go up to 700, 800, 850 during your event for short periods of time. So that has an effect. Plus you're doing probably process work, right? So it's not just the level of consciousness, it's the process work. So you would have an exaggerated effect to FLFE just going on in an environment, unless you did a lot of process work in the FLFE environment. We don't have many people that have a healing crisis. It seems to be more gradual. But people do go up 30, it's almost 35 points now in the first 90 days of being on FLFE, like 35 points on the Hawkins map. So there is a substantial growth, but it tends to be more gentle than what people would experience in a workshop environment.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And what I noticed about in your pod as well, which I was really pleased to see, was the recommendation around water, hydration, and even certain supplementation as well to support the body. Do you want to speak to that a little bit as well? I think that's an important point.
Yeah, with consciousness rising, and the same thing happens in your events as well. Life force, like we said, life force energy increases, and the body is taking that energy up and is evolving with it, both physically in terms of maybe things that need to be repaired, because many of us have lived in places where the energy field around us might be relatively low. So we have to use our own personal energy to kind of grow. Yeah. And then when we're suddenly in a higher, consciousness environment, that chi, life force energy is available to the body, and it does get to work. And that whatever the evolution is, it takes water because you've got biological processes happening, and then you have waste products that need to be carried away. So the water really helps us to clear things. And even when you're doing process work, water's really important, because everything's kind of the physical and the spiritual. It's really all together. It happens in the physical as well.
Totally. I mean, I just literally recorded a podcast with Vader Austin, who is very passionate about water and has done a lot of research, and that blew my mind. I come off that going, holy moly, and talking about water was 99% light at this core level as well. Like, it was just a fascinating conversation, which I recommend people to drop into. But with this in mind, then I can't help but thinking, how does this? There's two things I want to get into. How the hell did you get into this? But before that, is how is it working then? I for some reason I had that scene from Minority Report with Tom Cruise where he had those women in there doing kind of, connecting to the conscious field and doing things like that. But I'm probably off the mark here. But how is it working? Like, how are you getting fields into people's properties?
Well, the original inventor space, his house, was it was a Nikola Tesla experiment in some ways. There was high-speed alternating current through stacks, like floor-to-ceiling stacks, like connected top to bottom, top to bottom. So the whole place was full of these stacks. And the voltage and the oscillation was, fine-tuned to pull energy in. So it pulls upon Nikola Tesla's work in that way. And there was, a full first floor of these input stacks. They were pulling energy in, and there was one output stack. And so that created a very high energy and high consciousness space. And when I went to see the inventor with Clayten, I walked in the door. It was like kind of walking into the most amazing, holy of holiest, place in a shrine, or like we were in Egypt, and you would go to these temples and there would always be this holy of holiest place where the real magic happened. And it felt like that walking in there. It was like, well, this is, my hair's standing up, my goosebumps are going. And I had a full-on Enlightenment experience while I was there. When we were
when was this?
Eating lunch, and 17 years ago, Clayten?
Yeah, that was 2008, I believe, Jeff.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there, Jeff. Yeah, so you're having an enlightened experience eating lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, we walked up the street and just seeing everybody in the restaurant, I could see how special they each were, what was their special gift. And I don't usually have experiences like that, but it was the intensity of being in that high consciousness field that was this inventor's house. So this highly energetic space, and Clayten said, go ahead, put your hand in it. And I put my hand forward, and it was very tingly, very high energy. And that space, it was discovered, it had certain characteristics. Besides being high energy and high consciousness, it had a quantum association characteristics. So the original inventor was putting pictures of people's houses in it, sometimes pieces of a crystal. We take a picture of a crystal, and then a crystal in Europe would stay energized, because at first he was selling energized crystals by putting them into this space, but then discovered, well, I don't have to ship the crystals back and forth when they deplete if I take a picture of the crystal, and the picture goes into that stack. So that photograph identified that crystal as a unique crystal in all of creation. Nothing else had that exact shape, those flaws, that color. So it's identified, and that quantum connection would occur, and that crystal stayed energized indefinitely. So that was a very special characteristic of that space, is that you could create a field anywhere in the world if you had a unique identifier that could go into that space. like an address, coordinates, cell phone number for a cell phone in a certain jurisdiction, that identifies that place or that object, and it's unique in the world, and then that field activates. It's very much like you're thinking of someone and they call you a minute later. So someone, whoever it is, say your mother calls you, she's thinking of you and she's holding you in mind, maybe she's dialing the phone, you're thinking of her now because that quantum connection between the two of you is activated. And then the phone rings and, oh, I was just thinking of you. So we as humans are able to quantumly connect, and that's seen in twin studies, mother and children, where something happens across the world and they know instantly, that something occurred. Or telepathy, the telepathy tapes and things that are starting to come out. Well, how does that happen other than some kind of quantum connection between the two? Because there's no space or no distance and there's, no time. So that's the basis in this highly energetic space in the bottom of this system that allowed us to raise consciousness in houses and homes and businesses and around objects.
Wow. It's a head spin, isn't it? I mean, I still try and wrap my head around how quantum works. I mean, I've stopped trying to think about it really at the end of the day. But I've had plenty of evidence in my own life and through different healing experiences. Yeah.
It just takes personal experience. I mean, we had people that tested it for us, and we would take their address and put it into that space, and they'd be on the phone. They say, it's on. And we'd take it out. It's off. And it's 1,000 miles away, 2,500 miles away. Instantly, they would know whether it was on or off because they were pretty sensitive people. So it was through experiments like that we got to really see that this works. There's something happening here.
And the thing that has amazed me is the level of, like was when we met the other week, like the level of professionalism and how you set up a whole business company with spiritual values, like through the heart of it all, and grown this to this degree of what you've been doing for such a long time. And that is no easy mission. I know that for a fact because I'm doing it my end, and it's bloody hard work in terms of, going through all that. At what point did you think this is going to be our mission? This is our journey. This is what we're going to do now. Because that decision in itself is, I believe, huge and takes a lot of courage.
Well, we knew we had something in about 2011. We were experimenting with the technology. The original inventor was getting very old by then. He was kind of fading. And he'd started it off, Guy, he wanted to create a free energy device to help humanity. He was a retired German tool and die maker, millwright electrician, very well-trained man.
Free energy.
He wanted to create well, actually, it's a free energy device now because there's nothing, it's not plugged into anything anymore. We've just found a way to amplify the signal. So it actually runs off the ether.
Oh.
But you can't plug anything into it. You can't plug like a microwave or something in, or a toaster.
Gotcha.
But it's a subtle energy field. So we were experimenting back in about 2011, just before the 2012 event with the Mayan calendar ending. And we would go on Google Earth and we would find the lowest consciousness place on a continent. We'd measure it through kinesiology. And we would put a consciousness field on that area. And there is a law of non-interference, so we measured what the level of consciousness we could apply without affecting the law of non-interference. And we would put that area on, and the whole area around it would go up. And we were like, wow, this is really cool, right? Because the other inventor really didn't do much with that. He was more about helping individuals. And so we put that on. And then, a lot of these places where we found out they're all battlefields, like in the Cambodia killing fields or the concentration camps, places like that were, there's a story there that's, I would say it's self-evident and understandable.
I've been there. Yeah.
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 So that would help lift the whole area up, sometimes the whole continent, a few points, right? And we did more and more of this as the year went on, 2011. And we finally, after I think December 21st, 2012, we finished up, took a little holiday. And then because we were meeting every day at the end, right? It was a lot of fun. And we were hoping to make the transition into whatever was going to come next be as smooth as possible. And we were meeting in January, we were talking, and usually, just like we had our meeting today, usually before we have a meeting, we pray. That's part of our business as a spiritual path ethic. We pray, set an intention. And one day on a meeting, we really had a sense that we should consider doing this as a business, We should really, because this could help a lot of people. And the thing about business, people say to us, "Oh, why don't you just give it away for free?" Well, it's not that we don't want to do it for free, but there's a limitation on how much we can do, like as people with our own resources. Like we have almost 50 staff, Guy. We managed to buy our own office building. We have 25,000 square feet. And it's not all full with people yet, but we have really, as you met our staff, they're professional people, and they're all spiritual devotees. They're very, and everybody needs to make a living. So sometimes the best way you can be of service to the world, besides the fact that we give 95%, probably 99% of the time, we give 95% or more of the energy that comes from the machine, we give it all away in service work anonymously. Right? But sometimes the best way to be of service in the world is to have a business, a thriving, successful business. Then it can pay for research and development. Like we had all these EMF studies done. That last EMF study was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where's the money going to come from? We're willing to receive donations. People have given us a bit of money, but if you're going to sustain something, you need a cash flow.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's just how it is. It's how the world is.
No, absolutely, and as that ecosystem continues to grow and more money flows through, you can have more impact in the world. I think it's very easy. I'm all for supporting independent businesses. I do everything I can in my area, whether it be the local farmers market or whatever it might be. Like I'm very conscious of where I want my energy and my money to go to support that, and what's going to impact the world at a deeper level for sure. It's needed. So you got nearly 50 staff now, and how many people are on the service? Would you say?
Yeah, we're in tens of thousands of people.
So you got a lot of case studies as well, then.
We do. We do. We have so many testimonials, and
thousands.
90 plus countries. So I don't know if it's 91 or 92 now, but yeah, that keeps growing. But yeah, people all over the world. And you were asking before, like, how does this impact people's lives, or what happens? And I thought of one of the ones I heard about, which was a woman put the service on. She didn't tell her family, but her husband he just was very overweight. He was at maybe 450 pounds, upwards of that. And she said he didn't get out of bed, and she did she supported him and helped him, and he would try to lose weight, and he never could. And she put the service on, and his weight just went down. He didn't know, nothing changed. But something happened energetically to him. Some blockage was cleared, some belief changed about himself, but he started to lose weight just naturally on his own. And it was a gradual process, but she said it was like a miracle to her, because no matter what they did before, nothing would help.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a service where you can take it with you as well, right? Like an object or something, so you've got that resonance. And
Yeah, you can put it on your cell phone.
And how far does that emit out? Are you able to measure that too in terms of its distance?
So we specify that if you think back to the original machine in this highly energetic space, we would put sheets of paper in there that would specify the level of consciousness and the size. Because if you put the service on your house, because of the law of non-interference, you can't put it on all your neighbors too. Certainly not without telling them and talking to them about it and asking them to, think about drinking more water and, having some good healthy water in the house. And, it's mainly the water that is the reason why you don't just put it on someone's house. So we had to, when we created this, what we call programs are information in the field, but they're also information specifying the field, the size of the field, the level of consciousness of the field. And then the information in the field, just like Clayten was mentioning about some of these temples where you go into a space and, it's for your fertility or it's for your financial abundance. Well, there's actually a high consciousness, there's thought forms and high consciousness in that area of, say, prosperity. It's like they call it the grace of the guru. When you go to someone who's very high consciousness in some area, it might be financial. I mean, you might go to someone, you go to a lecture or you watch a video, something that's really done well. They maybe they've made fortunes 3 or 4 times. They just are magnetized to prosperity. When you're in the field of that person, particularly in person near them, that is transmitted to you. That because you're in their information field as well as which is their consciousness field, that has this propensity to make money, to do well financially. So we're building some information into the field, and it's always, like if you're with a financial guru, it's up to you what you do with it.
Of course.
Right? It's there kind of for you as a resource. And it's the same with FLFE in the consciousness field. So we write these programs in English. They're kind of between a computer program and a legal document, kind of probably closer to a legal document, because everything is very specifically laid out and defined. And that, because of the characteristics of this system, that highly energetic space, these things happen. And with the phone and an object, the field goes to 9. The highest consciousness part goes to 9 feet from the center line of the phone.
Okay.
So you're in a 9-foot radius bubble, 18-foot across bubble, and that's where the EMF mitigation's happening. It starts further away, but by the time it gets there, we want it to be fully mitigated as well as possible, and we can talk more about that later. But yeah, it's a 9-foot bubble, and then it's 300 feet radius or 600 foot is still higher consciousness than the surrounding area, and unless you go somewhere very high consciousness. But so when you walk around, it's really interesting. You walk into a store, and people just smile. There just seems to be like a very positive, like, bubble that you're in. It's really unusual.
Do you have any pilots on it? Like, is it because I think of the airplane and the EMF containers that are there, because I travel a lot as well,
Yeah, we'd sure like to have some pilots. I mean, we have some, by chance, but we haven't promoted it to because there's this kind of, I don't know if it's a fight, but there's like this, like the businesses and the government says, oh, nothing's happening, don't worry, keep that cell phone right by your head.
Yeah.
And there's actual, people that are EMF sensitive and things are happening. So there's that kind of friction that's going on. So you couldn't go to an airline and try to sell it to them because they're going to say, oh, this doesn't happen.
It's fine. Yeah. No, that's fascinating.
So we
isn't
have
it?
to find any pilots that are listening, give it a try. There's a free trial.
But you have a business service as well, though, don't you, with this as well? And could you explain a little bit about that? Because I was intrigued about that the other day when I was in email communication with Monica about the business being in the field itself as well. How do you explain that?
Well, a legal entity has a consciousness to it, right? And if your business has ever had a time when you've worried about it or wanted it to be different, it affects the consciousness of the entity, the corporate entity. And so when you put FLFE on the legal entity, it raises the level of consciousness of the legal entity. It's a bit strange, but we get so many people saying, yeah, I put the service on and, the phone just started ringing. I didn't do anything different. The phone started ringing. I had a flurry of activity. I could hardly keep up. That's really common right in the beginning. So it seems to clear things away that were there. And of course, if it's on the physical location, it will remove the negative trauma from the physical location, right? So it clears the physical location every second, like it's 1,000 million times a second. Those programs, those thought forms that Jeff talked about, go through the environment, and it keeps clearing it and clearing it and clearing it. So if something happens, it doesn't stay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And have you got the field on this podcast right now? Is that what's happening?
Yes. Yeah. So you can have a 700 field on a podcast or a public event, and you're still within the law of non-interference. That's about the highest you can go indefinitely. So we put that on our conversation before we started. So anybody that listens to this conversation now or anytime in the future, if they can hear us speak, there's a 700 consciousness field around that person.
Incredible. Yeah. And another question I wanted to ask you about this. Have you measured humanity as a whole? Is there any hope for us? Are we moving in the right direction?
Well, yeah, we've done a lot of measurements like that. The highest humanity's ever been has been in the fall of 2019. And then we started going down at the planet, right? So we're just talking about the planet. We were in the 240s in 2019. And then 2020, when the pandemic happened, the world dropped down. But 1986, Guy, was the first time that the planet overall has ever been over 200. So we went over 200 in 1986. And then we kept kind of climbing up. And if there was a big event in the world, like a war, the planet would go down for a while. And then, it's like an ocean wave. You have your peaks and your troughs. It goes up and down and up and down. But we are now, we're about 225. So we went down and we're coming back up. So I think there is a lot of cause for hope, actually.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. I just want to say, Jeffrey, I've got a warning and saying you're critically low storage. So I'll be mindful. I don't want to lose the file as we come to the end of the podcast as well.
Oh, okay.
Just to but
I won't go anywhere.
Yeah. So just to wrap up the podcast though as well, because obviously we've used it at some of our events now, and that's why we're on the call today. I've been bringing it into the home, and especially when I travel, I use it with the phone. Mm-hmm. And so I might be staying at a hotel. I mean, I always go in and clear the space anyway when I'm in there, but it's been very noticeable and very evident when we walk into the spaces especially like the community halls and things like that are getting used a lot by all sorts of different events and different things as well. So I'm intrigued to continue to get my own feedback system through as we go through as we continue to run the events as well. But for people that want to try this, you offer a 15 day free trial, I believe.
Yeah, 2 weeks free trial.
Yeah.
And there's no credit card. You just get on, and really, literally within a few minutes, you're on the service. And you get a control panel, customer portal, that you can turn it off, turn it on, turn it up, turn it down, and do these boosts, these extra high consciousness short periods of time, which are really great for meditations or just all sorts of things. So you get that in the first couple of emails, and then you experiment.
Be your own, be your own self experiment. That would be the great way to go about it, right? Try different things. What have people done? Any suggestions for them to experiment with?
Well, we have a consciousness slider in your control panel. You can slide the consciousness down, and you can slide it up, which is interesting, right? So you can see if you can feel it, if you're sensitive. You can turn the EMF mitigation on and off, and you can do the high consciousness boost. We have a 600 boost and an 850 boost, and so you can really turn it up for just a couple minutes, and you can just play with it and be your own consciousness researcher.
Yeah, fantastic. And are you doing something with the water as well at the moment? Isn't this something that you're looking at, or is that?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, we're moving into that, and the water will be part of the service, or will be available as we move into a new platform for FLFE, a new back end. And what we discovered is that water, the most appropriate level of consciousness for water is 850 on that scale, which is very high. And at that level, there's some natural structuring that happens, and absorbability in the body, and how it sort of nourishes the body is greatly increased. Probably the light, like from your previous guest, is greatly increased. So that's coming as well to the service.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, I'll make sure there'll be a link in the show notes for people to try the 15-day trial, and the 2-week trial, I should say. And it'd be interesting to hear what feedback people get from it as well. Before we wrap up with the podcast, any last words you want to share with everyone here today?
We just appreciate you having us on, Guy, and you've been very easy to deal with, and I've heard lots of good things about your work over the years, and I've watched you a few times, so I'm really glad to be having this conversation with you. So thank you for having us on.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Clayten. Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been great. I feel like I'm scratching the surface. There's so many directions I could take that in, honestly. But I'm sure there'll be more conversations.
Yeah.
Love to.
Yeah, love to.
Much appreciated, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.